Welcome to this episode of the B2B Marketers on the Mission podcast, and I'm your host, Christian Klepp. Today, I'll be talking to Laurier Mandin. He is the president and CEO of Graphos Product, who is on a mission to help innovators de-risk, position, and market innovative B2B products for category leadership. He is also the author of the book, I Need That, Creating and Marketing Products People Are Compelled to Buy. Tune in to find out more about what this B2B Marketer's mission is. Okay, so Laurier Mandin, welcome to the show, sir.
Great to be here, Chris. Been looking forward to it.
Absolutely. It's great to be connected. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think this is probably the first time that we're going to discuss this topic on the show, so it's going to be an interesting one for sure. So let's dive in.
New ground. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just say that you've been on a mission for a while now to help innovators and B2B marketers create and sell products that people truly need and transform struggling products into market leaders. So for this conversation, let's zero in on a topic, and I believe you wrote about it too. So how small businesses can outperform larger competitors by deeply understanding customer needs. You know, for marketers like you and I, that kind of sounds like table stakes, but we know in reality, we've seen so many examples out there of what happens when you don't do this. All right. So I'm going to kick off the conversation with two questions, and I'm happy to repeat. Okay. So the first question is, where do you see many small businesses and their marketing teams, if they have any, where do you see them struggle? And the second question is, why do you believe that focusing on features and benefits alone won't drive sales?
And this often applies to large teams too, but small teams especially struggle with trying to do everything within really tight constraints. So teams, budgets, limited skill sets on the team, time commitments, all that pressure to perform, pressure to ship, and you've never, ever got enough of what you need to do it as well as you'd like to. So those constraints, the smaller the team you have, the more hats people are wearing. Often the more unrealistic the commitments are that people are making and the expectations are. And so those pressures are all a lot higher. And the second part of the question is why I believe focusing on features and benefits alone doesn't drive sales is because features and benefits are never on buyers' minds. Buyers have needs and goals and lots of fears. But your feature list is never on their radar. It's never going to be. And their brain isn't even built to do or to want to do the work to understand it and to get it there, especially with all those constraints that we were talking about. And I can go into more detail on this and I explore it in the book, but thinking is hard and highly energy intensive to do. And your buyers have other things to invest that energy into. Teams don't have enough of anything. They're under-resourced in every way, and they're under constant pressure to move fast. So when they come to your website, when they're looking at what your product does or your service does, they don't have the capacity and the resources, the time, or the interest to go through connecting those dots for themselves. You really, really have to do it for them.
Yeah, you really brought up some interesting points there. And I want to go back to the first bit about small marketing teams and their constraints. And you've seen this happen a lot, but short of stating the obvious, there's a lot of chaos in an ecosystem with a lot of moving parts. But let's look at this from a more constructive perspective, I'm going to say. And I'm going to quote, I think his name is Jean-Marie Dru, who used to be the CEO of TBWA. And he wrote this book, How Disruption Brought Order. And he talked about creating order amidst the chaos. So back to you. How do these small marketing teams that are, as you said, wearing many hats, they're trying to create order in this chaos and they just can't seem to do it. So how would you advise them to go about creating that order?
The only way to create order in chaos is always to step back and create basically structure and to turn that structure into a plan and move forward in an organized, non-chaotic way. So having a really solid, sound go-to-market roadmap that your team can action on and be on the same page that holds everybody accountable is one really important way to do it. And so that everybody on the team knows exactly what they need to be doing and they know what they've got to answer for. That's one of the things I help a lot of teams work on is designing and fleshing out action plans like that, go to market roadmaps, so that they know everybody is singing from the same song sheet. And at least the chaos will continue to happen, and every day still brings surprises. But then you at least have a framework and guidelines to put things back into rows and columns and make things more orderly, so you have a chance at managing it and prioritizing it again. So again, in chaos, everybody's trying to put out fires and take care of urgencies, and very often what's truly important and the mission can get ignored. So really, really important to build in that structure and to understand what it is that we're all working to achieve.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can use whatever analogy you like, right? Like whether it's manning a ship and having the right captain and first mate, or having the orchestra with the right conductor, something to that effect, right?
Yes, yeah, for sure. I use, singing from the same song sheet a lot, just because it's very often you see where that's not happening, and everybody is just kind of doing what they think needs to happen, and you don't end up with a concert. You end up with a lot of noise.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like what the orchestra sounds like when they're tuning up right before the concert.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think of that too.
All right, fantastic.
It's the kind of an interesting noise sometimes, but it's not music.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. I'm going to move us on to the next question. So, in your book, I need that you speak at length about something you refer to as the coveted condition. So, for the benefit of the audience, can you tell us more about that and how it relates to creating and marketing products that people want to buy?
I came up with the name Coveted Condition thinking about it. I wanted something memorable for what I saw as this desired future state that your buyer achieves, not immediately through using a product usually, but through owning and using it and making full utilization of everything that it can do for them. And I tell clients that they should imagine if their product was taken away from a power user after a full year of use, what would that person miss the most in their lives? What would be the big, oh no, and not just now I've got to go back and do my research and find a way to replace this, but now what is that gulf, that gap? What could no other product do that yours has done? And I have a kind of a little mental tool that I use to help people understand that. I say, fill in the blank on this sentence on behalf of your customer. So the sentence is, I need, and then the product's name, in order to become what? And maybe that what is a new job title of where you want to be promoted to. Maybe it's become free to focus on another area of the business or life. But whatever that thing is that they say I need the product to become takes you beyond I need it to do. And it points out what that coveted condition is, what the real reason is that someone would go to all the pain and trouble and cost of adopting a new product that's far beyond those features and benefits that we'll talk more about that companies tend to list when they're trying to promote and sell something.
Absolutely, absolutely. You just made me think of something, and I suppose you could say this is same, but different, but it's almost like the same exercise that you go through with branding, right? Like, so there's always that question in workshops. Let's say, for example, you take away your company's logo from the website. Well, people still know it's you, right?
And I think that is wonderful. And I think it's another way of saying that is if you took your positioning, the messaging on your company's website, those headlines, and stuck it on another brand, could they wear it and could they say us too? Because if so, then there's no differentiation. And that's one of the big challenges, especially in B2B, is having this kind of not differentiating differentiation that everybody says, oh no, ours is uniquely us. It's like, oh yeah, how come
Yeah,
your competitor could wear it too? Likewise with the logo, right? If I could put, and I think it's just kind of interchangeable, whichever part you're swapping out shows that you're missing that differentiation, not just in the client's eyes, but really in the way that the company itself sees the product.
absolutely, absolutely. On that note, that was a great segue into the next question about key pitfalls to avoid. So, talk to us about that and what small businesses and marketers should be doing instead.
There's so many pitfalls, in terms of what the things that the kind of that tension between connecting with our audience and pleasing our bosses and peers. And we talked initially about, before we hit record, about content marketers in particular. And I was thinking before this conversation about where a good example was that content marketers are forced to write SEO content and get that word count up, having keyword density, all those types of things. But really, what Google's going to measure you by is engagement and time on page, and those are really important things. And regardless of what those other distractions are, as marketers, we really need to focus on big picture desired outcomes and the differentiation that's going to matter to our buyers, to our readers, being memorable and showing value that leads to sales, not churning out words that we think, especially if we're in workshops. I have one client that I tried and tried and tried to explain to them why calling themselves a solution right at the top of their homepage was not differentiating them. And if you go to their homepage now, that word solution is still there. I couldn't succeed with that client. And, sometimes it's really a losing battle. And it's just because B2B is so conditioned, they believe that their customers want to see them positioned in a way that fits with the expectation. But that's not, again, differentiation. It's about being memorable and showing value that's going to lead to sales. And for that reason, it helps to really understand what goes on inside of the buyer's brain. And in the book, I explain I explain in simple terms how brain science works, with the limbic system being purely visual and having a central role in buying decisions, often making them in a matter of milliseconds. The what I call the dog brain, because it responds passionately and emotionally and quickly like a dog. It sees things and makes decisions in as little as 2 milliseconds, while the rational brain, the neocortex, rationalizes and justifies, but it's 250 times slower than the limbic system at responding. And even at reading, which takes a lot of back and forth between the different parts of the brain, the human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. And features and benefits, things like that, are mostly, if not all, text. So it's really important that when we're talking to our buyers' minds, we're using language that is strongly visual and helps people to process things and get an understanding of what it is how we're going to benefit them in a really clear way that the limbic system understands. So with my client, an example is, instead of saying our automated IT solutions use next generation AI to reduce manual interventions and provide proactive issue resolution, which isn't far off from what that client was saying, you might say something like, you could have a self-healing system while competitors' IT departments are still running around with fire extinguishers. Now we have a visual that people can imagine and convert into images, and they're going to remember you. You're the company that stops you from having this crazy, chaotic, fire extinguisher comical scene, by giving us this self-healing system that you can imagine things fixing themselves behind the scenes. So even when you can't necessarily just present images because what you're doing is fairly complicated, you can use visual language that brings images to mind and automatically makes that processing and understanding of why you're different that much easier for your ideal buyer.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. Like I love that whole visual language piece. But you brought something up earlier in the conversation. I wanted to go back to it because I think you've seen this 1,000 times. Um, how do you deal with clients like that, where there's a lot of, well, for lack of a better description, there's a lot of analysis paralysis and decision by committee going on, and this is how we think the market wants us to be represented, and this is how we should communicate to the market. Like, how do you deal with that internally to let them know that perhaps this is not really in their best interest?
Usually I succeed. That one outlier is kind of one of these, okay, I'm going to let them have this one because they're so set on it. But I think it's really important, and if I were to go back to that client now and kind of explain to them some of the things that I just said to you, as far as how the brain makes these decisions, and to really show them even what we just discussed about, if I could take this very tagline and put it on your competitor's website, uh, then that means it's not differentiating you. And people are not going to, when you use the word solution, it's a blah, blah, blah word. And I've listed out before, kind of there's a long list of names, and it seems to keep on getting longer, of words that either are too commonly used in industry, or they're words that AI really, really likes. Like the word crucial is one of those words that LLM tools like ChatGPT and Claude just can't help but spitting out every third sentence. And because of that, those words are becoming just more ignorable. So I think it's really getting to the point with clients, with the businesses and the decision makers, that they want to come up with something that's really uniquely them, authentically them, and not just put out words that people are going to skip over. If you're putting words on a page, recognize that visitors are there just sometimes for a few seconds. And if one of those words is solutions, despite that, as that client would argue, people are looking for solutions. They're going to see that all over the place, and they want to know how you're going to be the solution, not just that you think you are going to.
Yep. Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Moving on to the next question. We all know that research is a key component, right? Like, especially in creating marketing products that people are compelled to buy. And I know we can go down a very deep rabbit hole here, but I'm going to ask you to be as succinct as you can. How B2B marketers can validate a business, product or service idea without requiring, well, a monster sized research budget.
And you can spend a lot of money doing research for sure. The other side of that is, whenever I do research projects with clients, I've never had them say to me, well, that just told us what we already knew. That's what you often think when you're being dismissive of doing the research, because you don't want to see that you're on the wrong track. And that's the big fear, is you don't want to be told that, by maybe the wrong people, that what you're working on is the wrong idea. But it's more the insights. Really, you want insights when you're doing research. So the key thing when you're doing research on a limited budget, and I have quite a lot of the book dedicated to doing this validation, because it's such a critical area. It's so important to do this right. But the most important thing is talking to strangers. And if you think it's going to be hard finding strangers that match your ideal client profile now, wait until you're selling the product, because then it gets harder and not easy. You're trying to do it at scale. But you need to talk to strangers, not family, and especially not friends, because friends are your friends for a reason. You chose your friends because they say things that make you feel good about yourself, and they want to stay friends, and they want to see you make something cool. So they're going to tell you that what you're doing is cool, and everybody's going to buy it, and it's going to be amazing, and let's make it. It's going to be awesome. I'll buy it, but they won't. And so you've got to ask these strangers specific questions. I've got 3 key questions that are really, really important. So first of all, have they actively searched for a better solution? Have they gone online and used ChatGPT or Google to try and find a better way of doing what it is they're doing that your product does? If not, there's a concern, because that means your solution isn't being sought. And to market something people are looking for is much, much easier than marketing something that people don't know exists or don't know that they've got a problem. And the next question, number 2, is what do they like most about their current approach? What do they like about what they're doing that they would be hesitant to abandon? Because again, we have all these biases, and a really big one is status quo bias. So if they really, really love their current approach for some reason, you need to know why that is, because you need to fight that status quo bias, and you need to address why your way is better. And then number 3 is probably the most important one of all, is because you need to know this going into market, and you need the results of it, is what would they pay to solve this problem properly? And with that question, high to low ranges are great. And next important thing after they give you that high to low range is to offer to pre-sell the product to them at their suggested low price. And that separates the genuine need from the polite interest, or saying everybody's going to buy it. If they're going to write you a check or give you money, cash money, to have that pre-order down, then you're onto something, and you're able to take that forward and tell investors that you have people who are putting money down for this product. And it's just the kind of the biggest acid test for validation is, yes, people are willing to actually pay me money. Strangers are willing to actually pay me money to use this product. And you don't need to do, massive market research to do this. I tell people you can do this entire validation process with just 5 good conversations with strangers. Might not tell you as much as comprehensive market research, but you'll have some pretty good indicators and you'll definitely have insights that you didn't have before you went into those conversations.
Yeah, no, no, no. Those are really good insights. And just one follow up based on what you said was definitely conducting research and identifying those customers and the types of motivations that they have. I call them demand triggers, right? What would trigger them to find the solution online? What importance or priority would you give to competitive ecosystem analysis? So, like checking, because a lot of people are saying, "Oh, we're the only ones in the market that are providing this type of solution." And I usually say, "Well, I kind of doubt that's true." There's If there's an alternative to what you provide, that in itself, directly or indirectly, can also be considered a competitor. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm always surprised at when I meet a new client for the first time and they tell me something like that, or they tell me there's just this limited set of competitors. And then when I go out and do fairly simple research, even I'm uncovering all these businesses and these options that I think they look very much like competitors to me. And usually they prove to be real competitors. So I think that's one of the things about just being, being inside of a product, being too close to the solution that you don't recognize what the other competitive options are. And for that reason, having somebody like you or me, having someone external take a look at what the other options are and build those into if we're doing a roadmap for them or coming up with their go-to-market strategy, really recognizing that there are more competitors maybe than the inside people think. And that can be, there's good things about competitors too. If you have a number of competitors that aren't doing the best job of solving the problem, they don't have the best UX, they don't have the best solution, and the solution that the client is working on is much better, then that tells you that you're in a market that exists. There are customers out there. There's people trying to solve this problem and paying for it already. Now you've just got to show them that you've got the best solution. So being able to do that and recognizing that you do have a reasonable number of competitors, but it's not a market that's saturated with solutions, and that the solution you're working towards really has those significant differentiators, um, then finding, having a great understanding of what those competitors are essential to getting to the point where you can put up positioning that anybody else looking at those other options can clearly see why this product is the standout.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. As you were talking, I just came up with another follow-up question, and I'm pretty sure you've got your thoughts on this. You brought this up, and especially if you're dealing with small businesses, right? They're forever going to be constrained by everything from funding, budget to resources, bandwidth, etc., etc. And there are certainly, I know this, but there are certainly benefits to having an external, I'm going to call them strategic partner, conduct this research, right? Versus them doing it in house. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that you probably run into this all the time where people are like, well, can't we do this ourselves?
Yeah, and well, here's the interesting thing: is it's not just the smaller companies, just the startups that have that problem. And I find that even for some of my larger clients, when my Graphos team and I go in and we show them all of the things that are possible, and we bring them the extra value that a good partner can, that it usually expands our scope of work. And pretty soon we're not, we're not arm wrestling with their internal people for the tasks that we can do better. They're handing us stuff and bringing us things from other departments and saying, can you help us with this too? This other department needs some similar help to what you did for this department. So I find that if as long as you're staying within your wheelhouse and you're able to bring that extra expertise to the client, to the business, um, you tend to discover more and more ways, and they become often, I think, just better at identifying and freer to see the ways that they're weak, or that their point of view is limited by only seeing things from the inside. I find the best clients tend to kind of recognize that organically, like they already realize that they've got these shortcomings. They recognize that they're too small, that they're strained, and that's an easier position to come at it from as an outside partner. But I feel that in my experience is that if we do our work really, really well, that the client tends to get better at seeing themselves and seeing their limitations as what they are, because it having a great partner come in also helps them focus on why they're there in the first place. And all these people do have their superpowers, but if they're wearing 17 hats, they're not able to go out and do the things that they came in to do that they do really well. So it's offering a really good outside team sometimes really fleshes out the skills that people have internally and makes everybody better at doing what they were hired to do.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And then, short of sounding corny, it's viewing you as the extension of their team, and that additional team that's coming in to support you or provide those, to use the military terms, those reinforcements, right? That you absolutely need.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's so different from one business to another when you're working with clients. Is some of them just kind of see that naturally, and that flow just happens, and they're just eager to bring in a good partner. And other times, you kind of have to really prove yourself, and you have to fight through it. You have you have maybe one difficult person that is being really resistant, and when you win that person over, now all of a sudden the magic starts to happen, and they're happy to all of a sudden take credit for your work, because that's one thing that I had a mentor teach me years ago, like over 20 years ago, was he said to me, "You know what I learned in my career is that we're not here to do stuff for clients as much as we're here to make them look good. If they take credit for what you're doing, if they're happy to say, 'Look what we did,' that means you did something good. It means you did good on them, because now they're not saying, 'Look what this partner did,' and seeing what their bosses say or seeing what the others say. They're saying, 'Look what we did,' and that says now we're working together."
Absolutely, absolutely. And I guess that's just that comes with the territory, right? If you're working in this ecosystem, you have to allow the client to take credit for your work, right? It's just it's just part of the game.
Yeah, and it's the highest compliment. It really, really is. Because if they're still saying, "Look what Laurier did, look what Graphos did," then I feel that they're not truly invested in what they brought us in to do. And you kind of do see that change when all of a sudden the credit taking happens. And I always, when I start working with a client, is even if I'm really fresh and new with the brand, I really talk about it as we. I really talk about us, because it's so important that when you get in there and you're working together with a new team, is that they recognize as early as possible from your language too, that this is a we thing. We're everything that we're doing. We're going to succeed or fail together. We're going to experiment together, and we are going to find a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I found in my own experience that that hesitation on the client side, when dealing with an external partner, usually comes when it's the first time they've done it. Like, it's the first time they're outsourcing this kind of work. So there's that fear. I guess part of it is the whole letting go, like letting go that I'm not going to be working on this. It'll be somebody else. And then you're still in that stage where I call it like the first date, right? You're still trying to build that trust and see if the other person can deliver on this or not, right?
Exactly. Yeah. On that first date, it's not so much of a we thing. It's her and me, and we're going to figure out if this works or not. And the we kind of happens as you start to have a partnership.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we come to the part in the conversation where we're talking about actionable tips, and you've given us plenty already. But so if somebody were listening to this conversation who is probably in one of these companies, right, where they're dealing with these kinds of situations,
Yeah.
um, what are some simple frameworks that any business can use to evaluate product market fit?
And product market fits is one of those things that's tricky. And I think you have to have frameworks, you have to have objectivity somehow to be able to know if it's going to happen. So I've got what I call the 3 R's of product fit. And it's the first R is for reviews. What are customers saying and saying consistently? And if you're organically getting 5-star reviews written by people in a specific market, then you're onto something within that segment, within that market. There's a good chance that you're achieving or beginning to achieve product market fit, because people are buying, they're liking, and they're going forward and saying that they're liking. And the second R is returns or retention. In physical products, if you have a return rate that's below 5%, that signals strong fit. If there's 5% or less, if you're up in that 10 plus range, then your product market fit is weaker. And if you're 15 to 20, then you're probably doing something wrong in the positioning. Maybe the product is junky, and that's a whole different problem. But with product market fit, people who buy the product like the product, and they don't want to return it. They want to retain it. They want to continue subscribing. And in B2B software, you watch your churn rate. If customers are renewing and expanding their use rather than dropping off, then you know you've got strong fit. They're telling you that. The third R is referrals. If customers are actively recommending you, not just saying they would or promising they will refer you to other people in similar industries, then you know that they're putting their reputation on the line, they're putting their contacts on the line, because that's the strongest signal of all, that they really believe you're doing something well and that you're worth recommending to other people. If you're scoring well on all three of those R's, then I say that you've almost certainly found your fit. And really, by the time you're scoring well on all those R's, you're kind of off to the races in other ways too, because you've got that retention, you've got those referrals, you're getting great reviews, and those are great things to utilize in your marketing, to leverage in your case studies, to bring forward in everything that you're doing. But if not, there's, those three R's also tell you where to focus. If there's one of those that you're doing especially poorly at, if you're not able to get good reviews, if nobody seems to recommend you to their colleagues or peers, then you've got to improve the product experience, reduce buyer friction, or find better ways to delight your customers.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So just to recap for the benefit of the audience, those three R's, right? So we've got reviews, we've got retention, and we've got referrals. So I have a feeling I might know the answer to this question. I'm going to
Yeah.
ask it anyway. Just from your experience, Laurier, how long does it usually take a business to get a balanced score for all three R's?
Well, in consumer products, it can be quicker than with B2B products. In B2B, it can take, I hate to say it, but it can take years, and it shouldn't. If you're able to do things right, if you're iterating quickly, and you're reaching out and trying and recognizing those, because I think when you have those three R's as KPIs, you get there faster. I would say it's nice to ideal to be able to get those three R's happening within a year of launch. To me, that's, if you aren't moving towards them, then there's a chance that you're doing things that are, potentially quite wrong, that your positioning might be off significantly, that the product needs improvement, but there's something that's wrong if you're not making measurable strides towards getting that product market fit inside of that first year.
And that probably goes back to something you mentioned earlier in the conversation, right? There's got to be either that one person or that team that's like the gatekeeper for all these three R's, right? That does these regular checkups to make sure that everybody's held accountable and that everybody is moving or rowing in the right direction.
Yeah, with any KPI, right? You have to have someone who is the champion of
Mhm.
it, because if you and is able to push that through to the other team members who are accountable for making it happen, to be able to say that, our retention is low, we're slipping, what is there's something that we're doing wrong, because we're getting way more churn than we should be, and we're getting more than we had last quarter, and to have people aggressively go in and work together to solve those
Yeah.
problems. So yeah, you need that, not just to be able to say that's what three our three measurables are here. We need to have identify what the standards are for them. If it's that 5% that's your goal, to recognize that, or it's or sub
Mhm.
15%, whatever
Mhm.
that goal is from where you are right now, to make it measurable. And then you can continue to adjust and tweak it as you strike those goals and you start to do well at them.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, my friend. Please get up on your soapbox here. Um, a status quo that you passionately disagree with, and why?
I've got a few of them, but I think the one that, is most consistent with what I've been saying, and it really is one that bothers me. It's the main reason I wrote the book, is that people believe still out there, even if they, whether they say it or not, they believe that product validation kills innovation. again, they might say it, they may not, but that's kind of the key reason to not do the in-depth and serious validation, to do the work that it takes to validate the product. And, it's a pervasive myth that's often backed up by repeating that Steve Jobs quote that customers don't know what they want until you show it to them. And that's okay when you have a huge idea and huge money sometimes, but you got to remember that Steve Jobs also got kicked out of Apple and wasted millions and millions of dollars on failed products that we don't talk about because he had that,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
belief.
yeah.
And that's really expensive
Hmm.
experimentation. Validation is, even the expensive validation is so cheap compared to the cost of launching something and not knowing what customers are going to
Yeah,
think until they
yeah,
see it.
absolutely.
And likewise, the brain science that I talk about in the
Hmm.
book, and that I talk about a lot as a result of that, it tells us that it's the validation is important too. Um, we use tools like fMRI. We can literally watch buying decisions being made in milliseconds in the emotional center of the brain. And when you validate properly, you're not asking people what features and benefits they want. You're discovering what's going to trigger that dog brain to say, "I need that."
Yeah, yeah,
And I spent 30 years watching, really smart innovators put their life savings and their investors' money into products that could have succeeded but failed because they confused validation with feature requests from their peers and focus groups that weren't properly set up, and just making mistakes like that. That doing it's not hard to do it right. It really is. It's quite simple stuff. It's just basically understanding, not leading people, not framing for them giving them these ideas of saying, would you pay this much? And of course they're going to say yes because you led them and you
hmm,
framed it. But just really having the customer guide you, and to not just be dismissive of the inputs they give you because it's not what you want to hear. I think that's the other
yes,
side of that. that, you know as soon as you start getting answers you don't want to hear, you go back to that, well, yeah, but they're not going to know how great it is until we show it to them
yeah.
anyway.
So true, so true. Okay, here comes the bonus question. And I thought long and hard about this one, but let's just say that there's somebody out there, and not going to name any names, but somebody like cuts you a check or calls you up and says, Laurier, I'm going to give you this much funding, and I want you to go out there and create this product that's going to change the world. If you were given that opportunity, what product would you build and why?
That's a great question. And I've thought about this a number of times before too, because to me, if it's something that's going to change the world, it would have to be something around solving some major problems like flooding or like fires. Um, so I think what I would come up with would be something that would help people to protect their home in a situation where I think of areas not that far from where I live, where very frequently there's low-lying areas that rivers come up and overflow. And if people could create kind of an instant dam system around their house that would protect house after house from flooding, it would save insurance companies huge amounts in claims, and they could subsidize these things. So I think solutions around helping people to better protect themselves instead of just having to run when things go wrong and come back to the disasters and try and fix disasters after the fact. And that's becoming unsustainable. That's
Yeah,
where I would put my efforts. If I were all of a sudden to have Elon Musk come to
yeah,
me and say, "Hey, here's $1 billion, go and build something cool," my R&D would go into. I'd probably first of all find
yeah,
out where we could make the biggest impact, and then quickly focus in on developing something that would be scalable and would be really effective in helping people to protect what they value the
yeah,
most.
yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's an amazing idea. I've always been thinking about finding a cheaper form of desalination because, as you might know, it's a very expensive process, right? Yeah,
Yes, and even for fighting forest fires, right
hmm,
in LA, I was surprised. I asked that question. A lot of people thought, why can't they just grab water from the ocean? They're
yeah, they're right
right
there.
on the ocean, but they can't because, and they do in some cases, but it's really not good because of what happens when you put salt water into these helicopters and into all this equipment. It just wrecks everything, and the salt doesn't work as well for fighting fires. So not just for human needs, because we've got all this
Yeah,
salt water and so precious
hmm,
little fresh water in so much of
yeah,
the
yeah.
world. I think that's a great one too. I'll go in with you on that when we get the $1 billion.
But again, coming up with an affordable desalination solution, because everything that I know right now about desalination, it's just expensive. It's just, unless you're a wealthy country, there's no way that you can afford that, right?
It is. And here's the strange thing. I mean, there's all kinds of ways like through reverse osmosis and other processes to do it. And then it goes and happens on itself in nature is that, that's how clouds happen. It's desalination, just have evaporation. But to make it happen at scale in a way that you can capture and put where you want, that's, that is the really tough question is how do you do that?
Absolutely.
I believe we'll get there because it's such an
I
important
think
one.
so too. I think so too. Laurier, I'd love to talk to you for another couple of hours about like desalination and all these other product solutions that can help change the world. But I just want to thank you again for your time. Thank you for sharing your expertise and experience with the listeners. Please, quick intro to yourself, how folks can get in touch with you, and tell us a little bit about your book.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been running my company. I founded Graphos Product in 1993. So for over 30 years now, we've been helping clients to take products to market, to de-risk their new product ideas, to create go-to-market roadmaps. And that's what I do on the day-to-day. And that's what I've done in my career all my life. And starting just before COVID, I started writing a book. As I said, it was motivated by seeing businesses fail again and again because there were simple things they could have been doing differently that would have saved them so much grief and could have got them to having a product that is built around a need that's felt by many people. So that's what the book I Need That is all about. It's about creating and marketing products people are compelled to buy and how to get there. So and the book, if you want to get a copy of the book, you can find it on Amazon. It's called I Need That by Laurier Mandin. And another good way to get it is go to lmandin.com, lmandin.com. And there you can get it in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. Or you can sign up to my daily emails. And I think that's the thing that I spend some time on every single day is coming up with ways to move people forward, to move product makers, regardless of if they're consumer products or B2B products, every single day to move them forward. So I create these short daily emails, and you can sign up to these at lmandin.com. You can find out where to write to where to get the book, or how to connect with me. Both at that website, lmandin.com, and graphosproduct.com. There's ways that you can get in touch with me and find out more about what I do, and maybe we're a fit. And if so, I'd love to work with you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So once again, Laurier, thank you so much for your time. Take care, stay safe, and talk to you soon.
Thank you, Christian. It's been a
All right.
delight.
Bye for now.